Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mayor and City Council Special Meeting, Taneytown, Main Street, Wednesday, January 29th, 2025. If you please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Clerk, please show Councilwoman Fuller currently absent. So starting off tonight, we're going to open the floor to public comment pertaining to agenda items. Again, this is a meeting focused on the Main Street program. Please keep the topics that you talk about tonight to that program. That is all I have to ask of you. And without further ado, the floor is open to any public comment. That's fine. I'm fine with that.
Opportunity for public comment after the session? That's kind of a,
That may depend on how the session goes and how long it takes.
It'll depend on time constraints. But again, if we're going through it, more than welcome for public comment afterwards as well. It's not on the agenda, but again, we'll make room for it.
one other thought that I had before I just make some quick remarks. As you go through the recommendations, possible session to make some comments if it was timely to do so, because I'm sure it's going to take some time tonight. Would that be appropriate?
I can't speak for council, but I imagine there will be follow-up workshops to this workshop regarding the Main Street program. This is an introductory. This is not an all-inclusive. We're not even making any real final decisions here tonight, besides maybe whether we're continuing in the commitment to the Main Street program, and again, what that commitment might look like. But again, that's going to be for council to decide. But I do imagine there will be more Main Street discussion in the future and future workshops regarding it.
I am concerned.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Mr. Cluth, could you pull the microphone a little closer to you? Thank you, sir.
I am a little concerned by the attendance tonight. I do know that fellow businesses in town are very interested in what's going on. I suspect, I know that some were out of town and couldn't make the meeting. At the same time, in all honesty, I feel that some of our businesses, residents are a little fearful about coming to a meeting like this because it might appear overwhelming to them, and sometimes because of the heated discussions that go on at City Council, they're fearful of getting caught up in some of that, and part of it. So in speaking very honestly, I do believe there is a lot of interest in Main Street going forward and the decisions of the council, but I realize how difficult it is to get people in here, brave enough to speak their thoughts and share their ideas. I am going to share the idea of one business, but let's see. Let me make this comment to start. So the letter of agreement between the Maryland Main Street program and the city is a very detailed and onerous document, you probably already have seen. It is a major commitment by the city. It is packed with requirements and requires a high level of skill sets to manage it effectively. As such, it could be overwhelming to the point that one single person, can't pull this off. Being whether they're a full-time economic development director and or Main Street manager. When you go through and you look at that letter of agreement and all the recommendations and analysis that have been done, there's a lot to it. It's a big thing. just wanted to make that opening statement because it is very important that going forward, our Main Street, certainly in my opinion, needs to continue for many different reasons. Anyway, I wanted to share the thoughts of Amy Goodell. For those of you who don't know her, she is the business owner of Deja Vu Jewels. That little boutique just down the street is a real gem for this city. No pun intended. Maybe a pun is intended. I don't really know. But it would be a shame, down the road if we lost Amy's business in town. Amy sent me her comments to share with you tonight. She couldn't be here. She's out of town. Let me read what she sent me, and she knows that I'm sharing it with you. I did just read through the main, okay, in fact, actually, let me do this. I wanted to give a copy to everybody for reference in the future, because I thought that her statement was so appropriate for the general theme of how people feel about Main Street. I'm going to go ahead and read it anyway, but I wanted you to have it for a little bit of shelf life and for future contemplation. I did just read through the Main Street program summary from the Department of Housing and Community Development, and I would like to say, yes, we should be a member. Paraphrase that. Otherwise, retain the Main Street designation. If the city has not followed the letter of agreement, that is very disappointing. I would like to know why it hasn't. Regarding function and mission of Main Street, my thoughts are to create a safe, welcoming environment for businesses to flourish and the community to enjoy and be proud of its Main Street. I think we are all stakeholders, but personally, I would like to see the businesses work together, support each other with more directed marketing, create a positive environment. Our market, and she's talking about herself and her business, our market is local and regional. It would be difficult for most small businesses to rely exclusively on local markets. From my experience, I have been able to pull people from as far away as Winchester, Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and D.C. When people have driven to Taneytown, they have been positive about the experience of visiting Taneytown, asking if there are more places to visit, where to eat, etc. What do we have to sell them? For me, it's one-of-a-kind antique jewelry. But I think overall, we need to sell them the small-town experience, history, cute shops. In summary, people in the community have expressed great support for my business, sharing how happy they are that I am here. At the same time, they have expressed frustration that local government has not been more proactive and holistic in supporting our efforts, such as the most recent Small Business Saturday, when some businesses, including my own, were left off marketing materials for Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts. I could almost repeat many of the things as it relates to my business. You see me quite often here in the conference room. I'm not here really just for myself. I have a business and I want it to be successful. But I'm really here for the community. Hoping that, my thoughts and expressions, I believe they're what other people feel when I go around town. I hear things, I talk to people. It's a general theme that, everybody cares about our town, but we sometimes wonder if our government cares about us. That's all that I have to say at this point.
Thank you,
Thank you, Paul.
Next public comment?
Sorry if my voice is shot. I spoke to 300 people this afternoon. I am Scott Davis. I co-own Rust with my mom. I've probably been the longest participant in Main Street in this room. I don't tout that as something great and grand. I've just seen everything that's been tried and everything that's failed. My input to this whole process is after owning a store in Frederick downtown and seeing what the Frederick partnership has done with their Main Street and how they conduct themselves, not only for their businesses and their communities, I think it should be thought to have a Main Street that is private fundraising to do events, community outreach, anything that can drive economic development and also community development within the town. Even though I am a stakeholder on Main Street as a business, it's important that there's not a bureaucratic a long history of lots of negativity around Main Street, whether funds or drama or steadfasting, whatever. But the future of Main Street in Taneytown, if we continue to have a Main Street, needs to operate as an autonomous, guided unit with good bylaws, good legal structures, good audit plans, to really set it up as an example of success and operationally. Money has come into Main Street and time I remember spending money through Main Street with a vote holidays and the first iteration of the hanging baskets. I don't remember a vote per the bylaws of Main Street for any other spending in my history of being a part of Main Street, which is concerning to some degree. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, things had to get done, people made decisions, whatever. But going forward, I think those involuntary, I don't want to use the word corruption, but it's like somebody had to get a job done, so they got the job done, but like there's no breadcrumb trail or whatever now. That can't go forward in a new iteration of Main Street. Because Taneytown historically has a problem of fortunate drama, people nickname it like the armpit and all this stuff, which, I mean, I lived here my whole life. I know that's not true. Perception's everything. Going into the next hoorah of whatever Main Street is, the levers of perception need to be removed. So that's my only input. I'd love to see a flourishing program. Part of it or not is a different personal decision. But at the same time, like, a little bit of guilt there, but
Thank you. Next for public comment? Hearing none, I'm proceeding down the list. On to new business. EDC position, I want to give you guys an update on that. For the EDC position this time around, we're going to be looking a little bit more local. We're going to be looking for somebody who has a good lay of the land, somebody who's going to be in the businesses regularly, especially our Main Street businesses. Again, there's a couple names that come to mind and a couple names we've been working with. I'm hoping to present something to council here in the next couple months. But again, just wanted to give you guys a quick update on that. Questions, comments, concerns regarding that?
So we're not going to post this position?
Not currently, no. I want to look
Trying to
for,
pick somebody.
I'm looking for somebody who has a good lay of the land, somebody who knows what they're doing economic development wise, and somebody who has a vision for the town. When we have a name and a suggestion, or when we have a name for that, we'll present it to council for that.
I don't know, I think that should be up for discussion. I realize what you're saying, but in order to get the right person for this job, we need to make sure that we know what's available in the marketplace. Simply to take somebody that's, we know, may know, appear to know, may not be the right way to move forward. I think we need to, mistake not to advertise this position to see what comes forward. We have it's like Paul mentioned a minute ago, this position requires a level of sophistication that obviously hasn't been here in the past 5 years, but certainly deserves to be here to render the service to the citizens we need to render.
I appreciate that, and again, as we work through it, if it comes out that we need to post a job up, if we don't have a qualified candidate that can fill the position, we'll make sure it gets posted up. But council will receive the resume of the person that will receive why I believe they are a fit for that department head position. And again, we are looking for somebody who is going to be local and a business leader to this community. Somebody who's really going to step up, take the reins, keep it local,
It's
and
not
work with our businesses.
responsible to just pick somebody. This position, as Jim just said, needs to be posted with the qualifications. If whomever you have in mind is qualified, they can apply.
Right.
I mean, you guys can also decide
You're
that by
not-
shooting down the nomination when I present
That's
it.
not the responsible thing for you to just pick somebody, somebody local for this position.
We went out last time when we were searching for somebody, we found somebody who wasn't local to the community. Again, I'm looking for somebody who's going to who has the heart, who has the feel, who has the pulse of the community in mind, somebody who is going to lead us down a path that is actually, again, serving the businesses, not only on Main Street, but throughout Taneytown. And again, if you guys do disagree with that nomination when we present it, you are more than welcome to shoot that down. That is your prerogative. But we're working through it. The city manager knows I'm working through it.
It seems to me this is going to delay the process unnecessarily.
This is not delaying it. I'll tell you, again, the last police chief was 6 months. The police chief nomination before I did that police chief nomination was 6 months. While some people were sitting on council, the city manager position went unfilled for 2 years. Trust me, you'll have the position faster than, or you'll have a nomination faster than our council has often had a nomination for a position. And I think you'll be impressed
Mayor,
with the candidate.
I think that you need to post the position, and because I think you may be surprised at who applies for it, and you may get an unexpected application of somebody who is exactly what you're looking for, but you may not know that they may be interested. And it may be somebody that you wouldn't think would be interested, but is. I think that by posting a position, I think you open the field. And if you have somebody in mind now, if that person decides, they don't want to take it, then you have the list already at hand to start going from. I would post it, but I don't think I would post it until we get a little bit further along with this Main Street, to understand, so that the person coming in understands exactly what they're walking into.
I agree, and I want to bring in a nomination before this council, before we had this Main Street program figured out to begin with. Again, I'll take that under consideration, work with the city manager on it, and again, if we don't have respectable candidates for the position, we'll make sure it gets posted out. But I will say, it isn't just one candidate we're looking at multiple candidates, so I appreciate it. Further comments, questions, concerns regarding the EDC position? Hearing none, proceeding down, restructuring of the Main Street program. Starting off with commitment to the Main Street program. Jim, do you want to lead off with what we're kind of looking for here?
Well, one of the things that's been pointed out and stressed by the Department of Housing and Community Development is the need to have a 30-hour per week or full-time Main Street manager. The state has really been pushing for stronger compliance with that with across the board. And because we're sort of under the microscope right now, having disbanded our board and everything, that's one thing that DHCD has been emphasizing in our conversations is, hoping that we will pursue that. I guess for our position, if we did want to keep it as an overall economic development, it would have to be weighted more towards Main Street than towards general economic development so that we would hit that 30-hour a week minimum. So that's a little bit of a shift for the position. If we do want to, stick with the program, we need to be at least working towards that full-time Main Street manager role.
For the benefit of folks in the audience or watching it, that is actually a responsibility under the letter of agreement between the Maryland Main Streets Department of Housing and Community Development and the city, and the Main Street entity, if there is. We're not making this up. This is something the state has in writing and has in the letter of agreement.
Additional comments, questions, concerns by council regarding commitment to the Main Street program? Is there anyone on council that feels we shouldn't commit to the Main Street program? Hearing none, does everybody feel we should commit on it? Just to make sure that the initial
yes.
commitment is there. Everybody
I mean, obviously,
feels 100, yeah.
given my history here, yes, I would say I'm obviously in favor of that. And I think the commitment to the program also is, we need to revisit our financial commitment to the program as well. How much we dedicate to it.
Well, that's next, the city's role in the program.
Okay, that's fine. We can pick that up there.
Yep. Again, I think we've established that council intends to stay committed to starting the Main Street program back up. Additional comments, questions, concerns by council before we head to the next point? Hearing none, we're going down to city's role in the program. So again, this is where council really needs to figure out what kind of commitment they want to make to the program. Again, what kind of financial commitment they want to make, how many hours the economic development position should be spending on this program. Any thoughts, comments, questions, concerns by council regarding it?
I mean, the responsibilities are detailed out in the letter of agreement, and I think that the framework up there.
All of council agrees to stick to the framework that we've already established then on that? Jim, is there any additional comments, questions, concerns you got?
Well, something that I think we were lacking with the last iteration of the Main Street was in talking with the Department of Housing and Community Development again, they've suggested that the city should have about 80% of the framework ready for a board to pick up and then kind of finalize. We didn't do that with the last board, and there certainly were some struggles with being able to come up with operating procedures and then start to work within them. So, it might be helpful this time for us to come up with at least a framework of some guidelines for them, some guardrails beyond what we did the last time. I don't know that they need to be in the city code necessarily, but that seemed to be a stumbling point for the recent board was getting through establishing their procedures.
I think that the one of the big contentious points was people weren't clear what their roles were, and in that role, what their responsibilities were. That's clearing that. Again, a lot of that is outlined in the LOA, so pay attention to that as we restructure forward. I think that will guide us in the right direction.
I see the city's role in the Main Street program they should be, I think we have to commit financially to them. It should be a line item in the budget, what we will give to Main Street each budget cycle, or if you just want one blanket amount. Also, the city's role should be, should we decide to hire a separate Main Street manager, maybe a 30-hour-a-week job, separate from economic development. And that the Main Street manager answers to the city, I guess, or the council.
The structure of Main Street is that the Main Street manager in most of the main streets that where I've been, and I've talked to a lot of them, is that although that person is often a city employee, they don't necessarily respond directly whether it's a economic development director, which is the case in some places, or if it's a separate person, as it is the case in many places. That although they are a city employee, they take their direction from the board with oversight from the city. I think that's the intention of the program.
One,
I'm open to comments
Why
on that,
can't it be
please.
another department under the city?
One thing I will say is I don't think there's a mandate to create a whole another department for Main Street manager position. Again, there's no mandate from the residents in that regard. I don't think there's enough hours to fill two positions between economic development and Main Street to have those two positions. That's just a waste of funds.
I tend to agree with the mayor with that statement, and to give you a little history, when we first hired an economic development director years ago, and we hired Nancy McCormick. She was hired as a part-time employee to handle economic development. When the Main Street Maryland program came on the scene, we felt that would be a very strong asset for our town. Applied for the certification and was awarded it, and at that time Nancy was chosen to be the Main Street manager too, to supplement her hours with the city, and at that time it became a full-time position. At the time, and between then and now, Main Street has seen peaks and valleys of attention. There was a time not too long ago where we had most of the retail spaces occupied on Main Street, and it required a lot more time than it would require today if we hired a Main Street manager. So I would say that if we look to fill this position, it possibly could be either an economic development position with Main Street responsibilities, or it could be a split position where we would officially designate the economic development director as a Main Street manager for part of the time.
And I think that's the route you'd want to go, is split those hours and dedicate some of those hours to the Main Street program. Again, I just don't know if we have enough hours that warrants between economic development and that Main Street program to have two separate positions. And again, I want to feel comfortable with that with the, again, we have residents who are asking for more officers, stuff like that. I'm not seeing the demand for two separate positions in this regard. And again, it just doesn't seem like an appropriate use of funds. There's just not enough hours for both positions. But if you combine them, and again, you dedicate hours specifically to the Main Street program and that employee's work schedule, again, I think that's the best route for it.
I did mention 30 hours previously. The agreement doesn't specify a number of hours for communities under 5,000 people. They expect 25 hours a week, and for communities over that level, they just say full-time. I don't remember what as far as labor law, what's considered full-time. It might be like 32.
It does say 35 plus in the LOA.
35 plus?
Yeah.
Does it?
Should clarify that with Main Street Maryland.
Fourth paragraph, page 2, about halfway through the paragraph.
I remember back in November, I talked with DHCD directly, and the same thing that, I asked them, is it common for an economic development director to also be the Main Street manager? And their answer was yes. You see it in towns of our population. That is a very common thing that you see. I mean, that's the answer I got direct from DHCD on that.
Jim, I don't
from the-
know where they are now, but back when I was involved with it, and I went to Main Street meetings with Nancy, the Main Street, the reason I said that is because the main streets that had separate Main Street managers seemed to do better. Because that's all they did. It wasn't a 40-hour-a-week job, but sitting around those rooms, they were the main streets that were doing better. And that's where I'm coming from. Like I said, it's a new day. I don't know where they are now.
I think-
But since we are so far behind the 8 ball and having to start over practically with Main Street, you need such a person, is where I'm coming from. Because that's all they're about, is Main Street and fundraising and doing things. Of course, a lot of these towns, back when I was doing it, weren't, their main streets weren't on state highways, so that had a lot to do with why they did better. But just overall, they seem to do better.
I think maybe we can start out, because like you say, there's not a whole lot of activity, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a lot for someone to do.
we can come
because there's
back
a
to
lot
it down the
do.
road.
But maybe we can come back to a part-time person, if it becomes too much for that person to do.
When
come back
there
and
is
look
enough
at it,
activity.
and especially if we can raise the funds for it separately. You know, the formula that DHCD likes is a third from the local government, and a third from grants, and a third from the local business community. You know, and if we can get out there and do that kind of development and fundraising, maybe we can raise the money that way for a part-time position to pick up some of that slack.
I think Nancy, during her tenure, did a very good job of attending to Main Street business, and I think during a good part of her tenure, the Main Street kind of hit a high water mark for our downtown. I would like to see that restored again. I think that we probably need to take it a step at a time. I don't think we're ready to I mean, maybe the ideal is to have a Main Street manager, and I agree with that 100%. And certainly it doesn't need to be a full-time position, at least not in my foreseeable future. But if we hire the right individual, if we hire an economic development, that's another question. Do we really need an economic director? I mean, I don't, I hate to say this, but we really haven't had one for a number of years. And it's something we probably do need. I mean, it's obvious. We need to be recruiting businesses for the downtown, but not only the downtown. The business community in Taneytown is more than the downtown. And there's a lot of there's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs to come to Taneytown and take advantage of the population growth that we've experienced over the last number of years. And with the right marketing and right merchandising and the right promotion, that can be done. But that's going to depend on selecting the right individual. That's why I'm so concerned that we only look at one candidate for the position. That's why I made my remarks a minute ago. We need to explore what's out there and see what can be done for us. You know, we may have made mistakes in the past, but that doesn't mean we need to repeat them. We should learn from them. And I'm excited about what can happen. And again, I think with the right individual, I look at the successful main streets all around us and say it's only for the lack of direction that we aren't one of them. And I think the brighter days for Main Street and the business community in Taneytown in general is upon us, and we just have to have the right person there to steer the ship. That's all.
And again, my commitment is, you know, when we do present a name, if council doesn't like, if they absolutely just tear it down, if it's just not the candidate that they want, and, you know, they shoot down the nomination, that's fine, we'll put it out. But let us get a nomination over to you first. Let me show their credentials. Let me show what they can do. And again, if you guys don't like it, we'll put it out. And again, if there comes to a point where we're talking and we feel, again, it's not just one candidate, we're looking at a couple candidates, but there is one candidate particularly in mind currently. And I believe they do a good job for it, and I believe they'd really set this in the right direction. You know, if we keep going down this route and we explore that we do, in fact, need to put it out, you know, they're not going to be able to do the job, then we'll make sure it gets out. But again, give us the consideration to actually get the nomination in first. But again, like Councilmember Tillman said, like Mayor Pro Tem McCarron said, I could see, you know, down the line, if there's more to do, we have a hustle and bustle on Main Street, there's a lot of activity, I could see, you know, a separate position, maybe that's part-time to start out with, and if they could justify the hours, go full-time, but, you know, right now, I just don't, there's so many other asks at the city currently that I just don't see how we could have two positions for this. And like you said, you know, there is also the consideration of, you know, do we need to have an economic development director? You know, that's not something to count out either. I still believe that we do. I still believe it is a valuable position. Again, I believe most of that time should more than likely be spent on Main Street to get it up to par and everything like that.
Yeah, that's one of the things from my years at the Chamber of Commerce. I was always accused of being, you know, downtown centric. Talked about at the chamber level. You know, there are certainly fewer problems for the businesses that are in the commercial areas, especially down by the shopping center. But that doesn't mean that there aren't any problems, and you know, those, you know, all of the flowers in the garden need to be tended. You know, and there could be some real opportunities ahead of us that we aren't really looking at yet, that such a person could help make happen. One of the things that you want to have out of that economic development position is a deal maker. You know, somebody who can bring parties together and you know, have a little vision and try to put some things together that maybe you hadn't thought of before. So, so it can't, you know, as far as economic development, that I think that is a necessary position. I think we can't ignore the businesses in the rest of town. I think that if that person can create the system and the structure and the funding to hire their own assistant, I think that would be a really great way to go. If we could get to that point, it would be.
And again, that could be a goal set for that individual to start going in that direction. So again, we're not discounting the idea of a future person just being totally dedicated to Main Street. I just don't. I'm going to be honest with you all out there in the audience as well. I just don't think we're at that point yet.
And actually, the time where you need to spend a lot of time is in the build-up. If you have everything running smoothly, you're not necessarily spending a whole lot of time with that, you know, and so, you know, as we're a long way from ramping up to that point where, you know, where we're running smoothly, but I've said enough.
Additional comments, questions, concerns by council regarding that? Jim, is there anything else you'd like addressed in that before I move forward? I think the consensus so far has been retain economic development position.
Right.
Again, there's still going to be that commitment to the Main Street program. We're going to make sure we dedicate hours and that employees roll to that. And again, so far the consensus seems to be that we are just not in the position yet for two separate positions. And I will say, I know, is Main Street's under what just the economic development part right now, right, Jim?
Yes, in our budget, yes.
You know, I wouldn't be opposed to making that a whole separate, and just a whole separate department line item. I'm not sure if that would help just kind of separate those funds just a little bit and keep it.
As a line item within the department, not a separate thing.
Yeah. What do you think in that regard, Jim? Again, I want to make sure it is protected for the Main Street program.
We sort of have a similar precedent under the planning umbrella, where we have it's all under planning and zoning, but then we have a separate, like a subsection for code enforcement and a section for the planning commission.
That's what I was thinking, was the
So we could do,
subsection
right, so,
under that.
right, so we could structure something like that, so it's still under the overall economic development umbrella, but
But
then
that
we
would
have like a
protect-
category for Main Street
Yeah, I
within
think
it,
that'd protect it just a little bit more.
rather than just a single line item.
Is there any, can I get a, do you need like anything, do you need like a consensus? I know we have the budget coming up, so it might just be best to get a consensus and we'll present it like that in the budget, and we have consensus to make it its own subsection under economic development, because right now it is under,
There's just, I believe,
Yeah,
one
just the
line
one line
item
under
under
economic
economic
development
development,
director,
right, for our contribution to the program.
so this would make again, this will be presented in the budget. I'm just trying to get a consensus.
You want us, are you talking about splitting, parsing the salary out so that it's clearly separately derived?
Yeah, we're just making it, so if you can recall the planning and zoning, there's planning and zoning, there's subsections, right? Police,
I don't remember it off the
No,
top
all
of my
good.
head.
Police
But
has
yeah,
it.
it's- I mean, I get it, because code enforcement and planning director are the same guy.
Think about it like this. Remember when we were doing some of the police salary stuff, there were subsections. And this would basically just make it its own subsection, so it just seems a little, so it is a little bit more dedicated to the Main Street program rather than just being under the Economic Development Department.
Might make the HCD a little happier.
When you make
well, I
it a
can see-
subsection, does it get its own funding, or does it take it from the big EDC pie?
Well,
Right now, it's under the EDC.
right, it would still fall under EDC, and it really would be up to what we're able to fund and what council
Allocates
supports
for it.
at that point. I was thinking as we were talking, though, that if you get too detailed as far as the budget goes for Main Street, you're kind of taking that autonomy away from the Main Street Board. So what we had envisioned in trying to do the last time that just, unfortunately didn't gel, was to let the Main Street Board establish their own work plans, and then from those work plans establish their own budget, and let them figure out how best to spend the money that was, either, and they never got to the point of doing any fundraising or anything, but, I think we'd like to see them have the autonomy to, to raise funds and do fundraisers and events and things like that, and then spend it at their discretion.
Well, the board should be doing that, but any revenue that comes in from any of that should then be deposited with the community foundation as part of the 501c3, as part of the independent
Right.
nonprofit that is Main Street
And I
Taneytown.
think this is just protecting those funds from, again, whatever the future economic development head is, from actually, again, going into that pot at all. I want that in kind of a separate subsection to where that is just going straight to the community foundation
Right.
for our contribution to Main Street. And that way, again, that gives them their fields. That's where they submit the receipts to the community foundation. That's
Yes.
where they withdraw their money.
But I think just having a Main Street line item is the cleanest way from an accounting perspective to just, this is how much we're giving the Main Street program this year.
So we're back to
And-
what I said the first time.
I guess I'd have to
And then
ask,
it goes into the community foundation under the current model.
But you're talking
and
about
then it's
keeping
up
it
to-
under the economic development director then?
Yeah.
I guess I would have to ask what that fund would be for.
It basically just goes
What
straight to
has
the
got
community
us in this
foundation.
position right today, or feel it's put us in this position today, is the lack of accountability. And what you're talking about is perpetuating that lack of accountability. If we start creating separate boards with autonomy and start feeding them money, then who's responsible for approving that budget, and who's responsible for overseeing the funds? I mean, it adds a complexity to the operation, and it's, again, maybe that's something we should do in the future. Maybe when we're up and running and everything is flourishing, and then we can talk about that
Yeah, I think we'd set that.
autonomous board, but I guess we need a board. We need an advisory board, in my opinion. I'm not sure at this stage we need an autonomous board with its separate budget. Now, we give a substantial amount of money to the fire company every year, and that fire company provides a service for us that is above and beyond what the county gives, and we recognize that through our contribution. Maybe some kind of donation like that could be part of the budget, of our budget, that would enable Main Street to host various celebrations or events or
I think that's what we're talking about, though. This subsection, again, the idea that I'm proposing is that subsection essentially goes straight to the community foundation after being allocated through council. The only thing I don't want to have it is under that economic development director, because I don't want anybody to be able to touch that. It needs to go straight to the community foundation, and that's where the record should go through. Any withdrawals, any deposits from there on out. Again, like Mayor Pro Tem McCarron said, almost like a donation, kind of like we do for the fire department, but just have that separate subsection. So again, that economic department head can't touch it. And that way it goes straight to the community foundation. There are the records of the withdrawals, the deposits, and again, that does also give them the autonomy over their money that is dedicated to that Main Street program. Again, I don't want it held at the city part any longer than we have to have it held at the city part.
And I think that can be easily addressed just procedurally, that, you know, whatever dollar amount council approves in the budget, once the budget is passed, the treasurer can simply move that money, you know, over
Write a
to the
check to
community
the community
foundation
foundation.
right after the budget's
Yeah,
passed.
I think to answer
and
your
that's our
question,
contribution for the year.
answer Jim McCarron's question on that, you know, one of the issue was that the board, and part of the issue was that the board that was established most recently was trying to have oversight over what was being spent, where it was being spent, and the Main Street manager wasn't cooperating with that. You know, so the oversight that the city would need to do was to make sure that oversight over what was being spent is actually happening, because it's not, you have to remember the way that the program is set up, and when it goes into the 501c3, it's not the city's money, it's the program's money. And the program, you know, and not to say, like I said, it's not to say that the city shouldn't be occasionally looking over the shoulder just to make sure proper checks and balances are in place, but it is the program's money, not the city's money.
well, like I said, accountability is the main issue
Yes,
here.
and I'm 100% behind that.
And who's responsible for that accountability is yet to be determined, but it needs to be the primary goal of structuring whatever we do with Main Street. That has to be part of that structure. We've got to know who's writing the checks and who's balancing the books.
I mean, we can flesh out those details at a later date. We
Yeah,
don't
you'd
really
want
need
to put
be-
those through.
We're kind of getting into the weeds a little bit tonight that we
That's fine. Additional comments, questions, concerns by council regarding the city's role in the program? Hearing none, I'm proceeding forward to MD, Department of Housing Community Development, Main Street Agreement. Jim?
So,
Any
well, as Councilman Tillman said, the agreement is fairly lengthy. You know, includes a lot of, it obligates the city to quite a number of things with regard to the program.
So check, Councilmember Fuller was the one working in conjunction with this agreement, right? As far as getting it over, I thought she was working with Mish on this one. Or am I thinking about a different agreement that they're working with DHCD? Propose the agreement on the city side. Am I thinking of something else? I remember Mish and Councilmember Fuller meeting for one of the city's agreements, and I thought it was with DHCD, but maybe.
I don't recall that.
Okay.
Not that,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
may not be happening, I just
I
don't
mean,
recall
I
it.
could be wrong on that. Not sure. Continue though.
So, I don't know if we talked a lot about this when we did the report back in October or November, I guess it was. You know, we sort of went through the points of the agreement and raised a bunch of questions for council as to how we wanted to address each of those. I think that's still very important for us to work through, to make sure that council understands what we're agreeing to with the program. I think the agreement has been circulated a couple times over the last several months, so it shouldn't be a complete, new thing to anyone, but I would just like to reiterate, that we do have obligations to fulfill there, and there were a lot of questions in the fall about things that we weren't meeting the letter of the agreement. The big one obviously was the full-time versus part-time Main Street manager, but, there were some other things in there that we were not following, exactly to the letter. Now, in our talks and research with other Main Streets around the state, we found that we were not unusual in that regard, that there were a lot of Main Streets that do not follow the 5-point approach exactly, that do not have active boards, that do not have, dedicated committees, and their programs seem to, in some cases, run smoothly, in some cases flourish. But it does sound like DHCD is trying to, they're getting stronger about enforcing the specifics of the agreements going forward. It sounds like the national program is leaning on the state, so the state is leaning on the local programs to
And I
better
think
job of
while,
compliance.
while there may be plenty of instances out there where there are strong Main Street manager, personalities out there who can drive this on their own, the issue becomes one of oversight, which is kind of where we ended up last fall. So,
And did we, were we ever following this to a T, or did slowly we just kind of let some of it go? Or I guess I just don't understand why would we enter into this agreement if we weren't gonna do it?
I've only found out about this last summer.
And the,
And I've kind of pored over it because I, didn't know much about it, but it doesn't seem that hard to just do what it says to do.
I think we already had a Main Street committee put in place before even adhering to this.
There-
Like, this was put
Okay.
back
the,
before we
the
were
annual
even
agreement is a
Okay.
relatively modern
Yeah.
thing.
Okay.
There had been an agreement in place years ago, and it didn't get updated regularly and distributed from the state to
Okay.
the local programs. And now, again, they're basically tightening everything up.
Okay.
They have more staff that's dedicated to the program now, and they're expecting stronger compliance than has been the case in the past.
It just doesn't seem like it would be hard to comply to. I mean, obviously, we have a lot of steps to take to get there, but
Yeah, we had just
it's
already
nothing
structured the
right.
previous one without an agreement. Again,
Okay.
we weren't here for that part,
Right.
but we are here for this new one, and that's why we kind of,
Okay.
we want to make sure we are following that agreement as we're structuring this new Main Street committee. So, yeah. Was that in place before they did the
Right,
last
that's the
Main
question.
Street committee?
The committee was
new
in-
committee? Or the new old committee?
I think it was the committee was in place, but I don't know that this agreement was in
Was
place.
out yet? Yeah.
And there were, there was the framework of the ordinance, which I'm not sure was being completely followed either. And then there were some operating rules that had been written but never discussed or decided upon or ratified. And so it kind of ended up being a bit of a mess.
So I guess getting back to, next steps on that agreement, this is our first, chance to have that special Main Street meeting that we started talking about in October or November. So we never really did set our course as to, how we wanted to work through the recommendations from the presentation in the fall. Whether we wanted to kind of go step by step and just follow through the agreement. Obviously, we're in rebuilding mode for sure, not just for a board, but for the Main Street manager as well. But it would be good, I think, to have some clarity for that person when he or she is hired, that they can come in and know what the expectations are and know, that they're going to be supported as they try to adhere to this agreement.
It might be kind of related to this, but it might be helpful for us to, look at the job description of this position and see how we would improve it if we, this is the time to do it, is what I'm saying. Make sure it's the way it should be.
Is there an existing, like, official job description for the economic development director?
There is. I'm going to punt to the mayor on this one because he and I have talked a little bit about that.
Again, if we were to change it up, one of the biggest things would be just to make sure that it does kind of spell out the dedication to the Main Street program. I'm fine with editing the job description. I have no qualms with that. Again, I'll connect with you, Jim. We'll get something and we'll try to present it for council on the workshop then on that job description. Is there anything in particular that council would like to see in the job description?
I think I think, and I'm not sure that it's in there, I just should have written it before I came, but I think the primary job of an economic development director is to if that's not in there and spelled out, I think it should be. Simply managing what's already here is only part of the job. Walked into my office 5 years ago plus. I suggested that he visit the successful main streets in our area and watch the shops that were busy and recruit them to come to Taneytown. And that doesn't open a branch here. And that requires knowledge of the economic potential here so they can present it. Visits, it may require presentations to a board or something like that, but I think that should be a primary goal of the economic development director, is to recruit new business.
Do you remember what that do you remember what that job description looks like off the top of your head? I'm trying to recall it in my mind. But again, if there is something specific, like you said, we'll make sure that recruit new businesses. That one of the things I want to make sure we see is something that indicates that Main Street dedication. Is there anything else council could think of that really needs to be hard-coded into that job description?
Until I read it, I really can't say a whole lot.
Yeah, let's get
But I think that the ideas that we're here, whether they're already in there or not, I think we're
Can we get
on the right track.
Can we get the original job description sent over? Sure. We'll work on some edits, and then during the workshop, we'll also do some work to see if there isn't any tweaks or adjustments we need to make on that. Good with you on the job description?
Yep.
Maybe is there something we can incorporate into, I guess, that says that they have to make sure that the Main Street program is adhering to that agreement. I know it's just words on the job description, but again, just putting that in there so we can hard code in case we need to revisit all this. Yeah, that'd be helpful. Does anybody have any additional questions, comments, concerns over MD Department of Housing and Community Development Main Street Agreement? Jim, do you have any additional comments or stuff that needs to be answered before I proceed forward?
No, I think this gives us at least our initial step to get things going. We'll need to certainly have more conversations about the city's role in the program and how we will frame things so that our next run is successful.
I know, Mr. Cluth, you asked about public comment after the new business had already been done and everything like that. I'm fine with it. I have the time. I want to make sure council has the time. Council, is anybody opposed to it? Sounds good.
Anybody?
I'm opening the floor back up to public comment pertaining to agenda items.
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. So I've been making notes as we go along, and so I want to try to share some thoughts that tie into what has been said. Letter of agreement, a lot to do. Job, and lacking of effort, concerted effort in all these categories. I highly recommend that fabulous job of synthesizing the information from the letter of agreement so it could be interpreted. Did some studies, and you can see what other main streets are doing. There are questions about, you know, looking, the city is looking for answers from you folks on certain questions. So I know that'll come in time as you go forward. But the main thing, there's a lot here, and there's a lot more than an economic development director for the city can do as well. I am concerned that the city is being too frugal when it comes to economic development in Main Street. Because, number one, if you can bring in new does so many other things for the outlook of the city. And I think it's so important to jumpstart the economic development director and the Main Street manager as soon as possible so activities are ready to go for spring. So if you have found candidates that seem to be the ideal candidates, they should be people that they don't need any learning curve. Don't need to learn the job. They should know what to do. I want to suggest, I mean, I do think it's a good idea to post the position, and you may have some excellent candidates lined up. You can almost start right away. But I would suggest consulting with Denise Beaver, with the county, the Main Street Management Director for potential candidates. They probably know people that are out there that could come in and get ramped up as soon as possible. Wouldn't be a bad idea for good candidates to be interviewed by some of the stakeholders that you trust to give you positive feedback. It wouldn't hurt. How fast can you get someone? The other concern or thought that I have, does the economic development director necessarily need to be a 40-hour It could be 35, it could be 32. You curve that budget for that salary, and you can spend a little bit off to a Main Street manager, a separate Main Street manager, which we really need to have based on the concerns that we talked about, you know, in compliance, where you could afford a 20, 25-hour separate Main Street part-time person.
That's always been the plan. I mean, that's been the intention.
The other concern that I have is when I look at that $12,000 budgeted figure that the city contributes to Main Street, I say to myself, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding. $12,000 doesn't get you anywhere to do the job that needs to be done for expenses and promotion. What does it cost the city when they have a water main break? I bet it costs you $10,000 or $12,000 just for that. And you want to spend $12,000 on Main Street? Come on. I don't know all the black holes in the city budget. I know that there's probably some padded areas. I know you probably have some rainy day funds and things like that. But I honestly believe this is the time to make this happen, and you can't be frugal or cheap in moving forward. Okay, like I I don't know what really is behind the scenes. I think that, I mean, look at Parks and Rec. We got a great police department. We got Public Works that does the job. Why can't we take a different approach, be very optimistic, and do what's right for the city, for the benefit of everybody? Economic development is so important these days. There's just a lot that needs to be done that hasn't been done. I agree with Jim McCarron's diagnosis of economic development. You need to have somebody who's not afraid to go out there and prospect. Prospecting for candidates, existing successful businesses that are looking to expand their operations. That's got to be part of economic development, and the Main Street manager can help too. It would be interesting to know how much the tax base for the city could improve that could help cover some of the concerns that the council has related to the Main Street and economic development budget. Could that fill some of that gap? I think it's so important for the benefit of everyone that we ramp this up, full court press, and I've said this before, so that we take this burden, this shadow off of our backs and to make Taneytown something that we can all be proud of. I mean, we have challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Additional comments, questions, concerns by the public?
Okay, you wanted to say something? Yeah, if you don't mind. No, please.
Dan Chavis, representing the Tannery Barn. And I just wanted to, in listening to everything everybody said, just while the council's reviewing these topics, a couple things to keep in mind. You know, previous economic development director, you know, I don't know where the oversight was or wasn't, but just make sure going forward, I think it needs to be addressed to make sure things are being reported, things are being done the way they're supposed to be done. And I would kind of, you know, I think there's been a lot of new people that have come into the area with a lot of different diverse backgrounds. I think, you know, I kind of agree that I think putting this out there, posting the job, that you don't know what you're going to get, and it doesn't hurt. And if, you know, if yours rises to the top, then they're the best out of the pool. But unfortunately, if you're dictating who's in the pool, then all you're going to get is the best of what you've picked. So that's.
Thank you. I appreciate that perspective. I will say again, I'm still moving towards making sure that we have a nomination. If council doesn't like my nomination, we'll make sure that it gets put out. But I think council will be pleased with the nomination that I have. Additional comments, questions, concerns by the public?
Accountability is a big threat of mine, and I know that, you know, the council is trying to figure out accountability. But I do know with the agreement, required to submit a report at the end of the year on financial transactions with the money that is in Main Street. If anything for accountability, just for the financial support, there needs to be a strong job requirement or even codified that maybe we should do those reports monthly and have them submitted to council for public oversight, because
Or at least quarterly.
just to publicly hold that spend accountable. For me, that's the thing that's been the hardest part about Main Street is we go to spend money to do things and then we don't know how we spend the money, who spent the money, and where the money went. Because we go to do an event and it'd be like the money's gone and we'd be like, where's the money? We had no idea. So for accountability, I think the most public form of accountability, to hold the Main Street manager accountable and the board accountable, is probably the best way to set that up for success.
Thank you, appreciate it. Additional public comment pertaining to the items we've talked about today? Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion of adjournment.
Can I say one thing before we adjourn?
Sure.
And I just want to address the business community that's here this evening and say from my personal point of view and my 35 years history here on the city council, that we know that there's been a lack of support during these last few years. And we're all committed, and I'm speaking for the council, but if the council objects to what I'm going to say, you let me know. But we're all committed to making it better, to making it more effective, and to making it better not only for our businesses, but for our city. And by making it better for our businesses in the city, we're making it better for our citizens. So this is a win-win for everybody. And we're going to do this right this time. We need your continued input. If there is thoughts that you want to share, that you go back home and I wish I would have said that, or I wish I would have got up and spoke that way, write us an email, drop a line to, you can drop it to me, which I'm the representative of economic development, or address it to the mayor or the city manager, or anybody. I don't care who you address it to. But if you have thoughts you want to share with us, share them. We want that information. We need that feedback so that when we get into the nuts and bolts of what we're trying to do here, we'll be able to put together a program that's going to benefit those three categories: this businesses, the city council, and the citizens.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Couple of quick comments. One of the things, and we're not, this isn't the forum to start hashing this out, but the things that we need to think about going forward is and probably before we really start delving into the answers to the questions posed by Jay Mishi's report from back in the fall, is we really need to decide what the mission and scope is of the organization. And what are we trying, what do we want this person, what do we want this board and this group to accomplish, because I think that we were concentrating on a lot of small things without having fixed the big things. And I think it's understanding that we need to be looking at the big things, while we're talking about watering hanging baskets, other main streets are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants and buying buildings. Maybe that isn't what we need to do, but maybe we need to do more than what we were looking at before in terms of a scope of what Main Street, what their mission is. And so I think that before we really even get into nuts and bolts, is we need to make sure that we're all talking the same language in terms of the mission. And I just wanted to read one thing, and this is from the comprehensive plan survey that the Planning Commission is working on. There were opportunities in the survey for open-ended responses, and I just want to read this one. The sentiments here were echoed a number of times. So if you go back and look through that report, you'll see it. But this person said, "We enjoy living in Taneytown, but hope it fulfills its potential. There are too many business places sitting vacant, and we've seen many businesses open quickly and close since moving here. Why is that? The Parks and Rec has been a silver lining, and we hope that the Main Street revitalization and small businesses are encouraged to open there. It is a glaringly underutilized area of town. Signage should be improved as well for new businesses to be easily discovered. We want to spend our dollars locally, but because of the lack of businesses and amenities in town, residents find themselves driving to other towns to spend their money. Thanks for conducting the survey, and please broadcast volunteer opportunities for residents for helping Taneytown reach its full potential." Great sentiment and very well said.
have no idea who said that, but
Thank you. Motion for adjournment. Looking for a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, guys.
thank you, everyone.